There's no glory in being busy. Like how many people have you seen in the last month? You say, hey, how you doing? They go, oh, I'm busy. Right, well, busy is not an answer to the question of how are you, first of all, right? So how can we focus and get really, really deep and good at something that we're passionate about, interested in, and have talent for? So what you might call our zone of genius or our unique ability. How can we just do that and then really crack open the big potential of our future? So
Alex, it's so wonderful to chat with you today. Thanks for joining me.
awesome. You bet. Great to see you, Chicky.
It's great to see you too. So, I'd love to just start this chat with the question I ask all my guests. And that is, if you had to pick one well-being boosting strategy, what would it be and why?
For me, my well-being boosting strategy is to sit in a dark, hot box with a bunch of friends. So I like to sauna, and I do sauna because it's super regulating for my body. It's also can be kind of a social time with folks, or a quiet time, depending on who's in there. I've been doing this for, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing sauna for like probably 8 or 9 years, but I've been doing like post workout steam and heat for probably close to 20 years.
Well, I actually love that. I'm missing some detox genes, which I didn't even know that was a thing.
Okay.
So I use the sauna regularly too because it
Mm.
helps me function.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I'm a huge fan. Kind of, like my excuse for going to the gym is that I get to go to the sauna afterwards. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, so we're going to be talking today a little bit about your Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. And this is
Hmm.
kind of a unique summit that focuses on kind of the mental health and well being of entrepreneurs. So
Sure.
before we dive into that, I'd love to just know a little bit about what motivated you to create this conference or what your backstory is.
Yeah, no, thanks. I have been an entrepreneur for a long time, and started run several companies. This is probably 15 years of experience doing this, and I've also been pretty plugged into the startup and founder ecosystems, particularly in Boulder, where I live. And one of the things that I noticed over time was so many entrepreneurs, myself included. So I'll talk about others, but really this is a story about me. Who are out there with great ideas, tons of inspiration, trying to build really cool products and companies and services and stuff like that, and wind up with a lot of stress on our shoulders. So this happens uniformly to entrepreneurs, and especially entrepreneurs of the male variety. We tend to have a hard time releasing that stress. Like we don't talk about it very much. We don't open up very much. We don't even know necessarily like how to begin that process. And so what happened to me was, over time, I experienced this myself, and with the with feedback, I'll call it that, from my wife, for example, like, hey, why are you so stressed out all the time? Really helped me to understand, what, I don't really have a support mechanism or a vocabulary for this, or a way to talk about what's going on. And entrepreneurs will very commonly suffer from things like imposter syndrome, where they feel like they snuck into the party, or burnout, where they just, you just simply get so exhausted that you kind of tune out of everything, right? And you have sometimes literally physical collapse as well as just psychological collapse. And so a lot of entrepreneurs have these things, and just generalized anxiety around, hey, is this thing going to work? Am I going to be able to have the impact I want in the world? And so on. And I realized that over time I've developed like quite a big library, if you will, of resources and things that would be helpful to entrepreneurs. And so as I mentored other entrepreneurs who were earlier on in their journey, they all would think that they wanted to really talk about the mechanics of their business and their pricing or go to market strategy or these sorts of things. And what they really wanted to talk about was, when am I going to start feeling okay in here? Right? Like I don't feel okay in here. When's that going to change? And like I said, a lot of entrepreneurs simply didn't have the vocabulary to name an emotion, to talk about fear, to talk about feeling like an imposter, but they didn't belong, all this kind of stuff. And so that was the motivation, was really, hey, I've learned a lot of stuff over my life and in my career. I'm a good curator of information. I can bring together people who have tremendous ideas and insights that can be helpful to this community who's doing really important, meaningful work, and help them to become better humans, better people as they're out there building their businesses. So we can, and in fact, we almost have to be internally regulated and good people and take care of ourselves in order for our business to flourish. One of the great misconceptions that's out there is that it's an either or. I'm either totally hippy dippy barefoot, and doing all this work and have a very small, low impact company, or we're shooting for the moon and everyone's an asshole and we're burning the bridges, and my relationships are suffering and my health is suffering, and all that sort of stuff. So that's a totally false dichotomy. And we believe at Conscious Entrepreneur that not only can you do both, you have to do both. And the conversations that we have are around putting these together in such a way that you're able to magnify and amplify the impact that you're having through your business.
I totally love that. I've had the same experience with my mentees. Loneliness is a big thing because you're kind of like on this island by yourself, trying to figure everything out by yourself. And stress, of course, is a huge one. Are those the things you find in your community that are the biggest things, or are there specific topics?
People so value being able to connect with peers.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges about being a CEO or an entrepreneur is you have limited vehicles to be able to share what's going on. So, you see the whole business. So let's say that you're kind of early stage, but you're building something big and ambitious. So you might be a 5 or 10 person company. Maybe you're you've got significant revenue already. Maybe you've raised external financing. So, there's a lot of weight on your shoulders right out of the gate. It's hard to go to others and share things like, oh shit, I'm worried we're going to run out of cash in 8 weeks, or this big customer is having some challenge or problem, or I think I need to fire my engineer, or what are the millions of things that come up all the time. If you burden your partner or spouse with this, that person often, they're not really, maybe they care about you as a person, but they're maybe not in the nuance of the business as much, right? So they can't fully identify with that, or they try to solve it from a certain angle that winds up not being helpful, because sometimes all you need to do is vent. Similarly, if you're trying to talk to your co-founders, if you're lucky enough to have co-founders, they don't always want to hear see all the dirty laundry. They're like the full gamut. They want to know that you're in charge, that you have the command of what's going on, and you're going to make a good decision. Your employees most certainly do not want the full details here. And as a result, it can be really hard to find people to talk to. People who have been there, done that, are supportive, and not necessarily jumping in to fix everything. So that's another consideration here, right? Is jumping in to fix everything. So loneliness is an issue because we internalize, and through feedback we realize, wow, I really can't talk to everybody about this, and therefore we kind of hold more inside. So when you have an opportunity to connect with a community like your community, right, or like the Conscious Entrepreneur community, then everyone just feels like, oh, thank goodness, right? I can finally talk and share. And we all think we're the only ones with our particular set of problems and challenges. It turns out everyone's basically in the exact same situation. So that's a really powerful conversation we have. Just for example, we'll say we're talking about, near-death experiences of your company or startup, right? And it's like, how many people? And it's like, half the room puts up their hand. How many people think that this is a problem? Half the room puts up their hand. And then everyone looks around. They're like, oh, cool, I'm not alone. There's a way through this, and we're sort of tapping into the inspiration and kind of really good energy just simply to be supported. So for sure, loneliness is a very big deal, and it's definitely something that we were tackling head on.
So tell me a bit more about how you do this in the context of your summit. So is there like specific sessions on these particular kind of well-being challenges that entrepreneurs have, or how does this work in this context?
It's sort of a through line theme. And so what I mean by that is I keep everybody in the same room the whole time. We don't break out. We don't do anything. We all stay in the same room. The event itself is up at the UMC ballroom at the University of Colorado here in Boulder. So it's the biggest ballroom in all of Boulder. the only place where we can hold a couple hundred entrepreneurs and have these conversations. So we will prompt from the stage things, basically table discussions, right? What's going on for you? What's come up? What's the biggest challenge over the last 12 months? What's the biggest opportunity in front of you right now? What's holding you back? All these crazy questions that nobody asks at a typical business conference. And we do it in the context that this is the stuff you have to get right in order for your business to grow. Everybody thinks, oh, my business growth is related to external factors, the market, my product, my pricing, my services, whatever. No, you are the bottleneck of growth in your company. The company is the mirror of the CEO. And if, as the CEO and the founder, you don't have your act together, your company is not going to grow until you do. And nobody teaches you this stuff, right? There's schools out there for sales, marketing, fundraising, product design, et cetera. There's like no schools out there for how to be a good CEO and stay on the right track as you're building a business. And that's the conversation that we have at the summit. So a lot of it is that. And then a lot of it is the speakers sharing their experiences on stage. So we are blessed that we have wonderful speakers who have created very significant businesses that are hitting all the external, milestones and metrics you can imagine. Big revenue, big profits, they've raised a lot of money, they have a big team. So all the things that look very successful. And we've had people up on stage talking about being close to suicide, breaking down in tears, not trusting their spouse because of something that's going on, having unexpressed rage that was getting in the way of them being a good boss and leader. Again, this is not the stuff you would normally see at a startup conference or a business conference. But I prime all the speakers to talk about this stuff because this is the stuff that matters. And then helpfully we're supported by people who can then share, well, here's what I do, here's my program, here's my regimen, here's how I look after myself, here's the things that have been helpful for me or my team or my company. And that allows us to all see, oh, cool, here's the way through this stuff. Because once we acknowledge that there's a challenge, there's issues, it can be very difficult, then we want to say, so what do we do about it? And these people then say, here are ideas. Now, are you going to resonate and love every speaker, every idea that shows up? You are not, right? And that's by design. The idea here is not that we're all agreeing on everything and that we all say, here's the path forward. So instead, I'm bringing up people, and it could be someone who's, I can remember instances of someone who's raised, hundreds of millions of dollars for multiple businesses, extremely successful external person, still walking around feeling like, they're suppressing the asshole within, right? Sometimes that pops out and that's an issue. So we're learning from these real humans to recognize, okay, well, if this person had this challenge and got through it and built a great company, then I can do that too. And that's part of the power of the community, is realizing, oh, I can do this too. Like none of these are insurmountable obstacles. These are all part of the human existence that we're having, and we can all do this together.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful even for our viewers that aren't entrepreneurs, to just know that people who seem like they have it all together still struggle with
For sure.
well-being challenges. And hopefully we can blame ourselves less because it's part of the human experience, like you said.
It's part of the human experience. It's perfectly normal for people to feel overwhelmed or stressed out or fearful, and these kind of things. We all have creative energy inside of ourselves that we want to release. We all want to do great things in the world. A lot of the times we get in our own way because of stuff that's been happening in our lives and in our heads. And for the most part, once we connect with others, we can put that into a perspective, right? It doesn't mean that, all this stuff goes away, but it means that, okay, I see I'm not the only one who has this. And here are ideas and inspiration from other people. And that then allows me to go take great action toward my goal.
I absolutely love that. I know even in founding my own business, it was like a lot of reflecting on which parts of my prior life I wanted to keep in my new life. So like I am all about work-life balance.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people in the entrepreneurship community are like, no, you got to work 70, 80 hours a week. And actually, the more I prioritized balance, the more efficient and effective my business became. So it like kind of blew my mind that tricks like this, or like getting in the right mindset and focusing on the values that actually matter to you, is extremely useful not only for success in business, but in your well being.
So let me share something that has really come up and been very powerful for me. One of the ideas that it's based on a book. Many people in the community over the last 18 months have been telling me to go read this book called 10x is easier than 2x. It's written by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. Dan Sullivan is sort of the idea guy behind it. Ben Hardy is the person who actually wrote the book. And Ben Hardy is coming to the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in May in Boulder to share the 10x mindset, the 10x philosophy, and how to really do exponential growth. But to your point, a big part of this, a big part of significantly growing your business, so changing the trajectory that your business is growing on, is a mindset game. It's not an external game. And like you just said, some people are going to say, I need to work. I need to say yes to everything. I need to have 100 projects going on. I need, all these irons in the fire, whatever analogy you want to use, right? There's just too much happening. When you do that, and this is in Ben Hardy's book, this is just generally the 10x principle, the 10x philosophy. When you do that, you are massively diluting your talents and energy to the point where all you can possibly expect is incremental growth. You can expect to get a little bit better here, a little bit better there, and okay, fine, we got a little gentle slope to the line. For most entrepreneurs, in fact, for almost anyone, that's not what we want in our life, right? We want more. We want to be able to express more, to give more, to have a bigger impact, to do great things. And we want 10x growth. Like, everyone's attracted to this idea of really big exponential growth. And the topic that stood out to me, or kind of the insight, the nugget in there, was you have to actually be super vigilant about what you say yes to. Say no way more often than you say yes, and cut away the things that no longer serve you. So whether you're an entrepreneur or not, there's a very good chance that something like 80% of the things that you do every day generate only 20% of the value or the output or the benefit or the enjoyment of whatever you're doing. So
I was just
what does
thinking
that
about
mean?
the 80-20 rule too.
It means we're essentially wasting time, right? We're wasting time and energy. We're throwing it away. And instead, and again, this applies to entrepreneurs, but also people who are not entrepreneurs, how can we focus and get really, really deep and good at something that we're passionate about, interested in, and have talent for? So what you might call our zone of genius or our unique ability. How can we just do that and then really crack open the big potential of our future? So that was something that got me really excited. I read the book after several people had recommended it to me, and I was like, wow, this is something the community needs to hear about. So that's why I connected with Ben Hardy, and I was like, hey, will you come out and teach this stuff to our group in Boulder? So I'm psyched that he's doing that.
Yeah, that's such an important tip. I definitely see in my community people spending way too much time on the 80% and not enough time on the
Well,
20%
it
stuff that
takes
works.
courage and it takes
Yeah.
commitment,
And
and
awareness too, I think.
these are the things that people aren't willing to do, right? So you could say, oh, hey, Chicky, we need to spend less time wasting time wasted on other things. You say, yeah. But it's like really understanding, what am I doing? What am I protecting myself from? What am I not willing to say no to? What am I not willing to cut? So there's all that stuff. And then what would my life look like if I were to just focus on the things that I'm really, really good at? So if I could spend 90% of my days in my zone of genius, then what?
Bliss.
Right. So that's a big shift there, because a lot of people think, oh, but I equate busyness with value. So I do this, right? I equate busyness with my value as a human being, right? And I'm like, if I'm not working and suffering and have blood on my knuckles and constantly doing things, then who am I? That's like a mental model I've had for ages. And I'm like in the middle of reprogramming that. But that's a really important thing to say. Do I need to be busy? No. In fact, I could do way fewer things and still have the same or more impact on life. And so the courage, the commitment, the awareness, like you said, those are the starting blocks to be able to get there.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing to reprogram that? Because that's like, I think the crux, not only in this, but like in the path towards greater well-being. It's all about reprogramming those beliefs in a variety of different ways. So just even having one example from what you're doing would be super helpful, I think.
So instead of feeling FOMO, I prefer to start feeling JOMO instead, the joy of missing out. And what that does for me is that allows me to to just not do the things that may not be energizing or that I feel like aren't either I'm not good for it or it's not good for me. And so what that does is it allows me to reduce the busyness that I have on my schedule. There's no glory in being busy. Like how many people have you seen in the last month? You say, "Hey, how are you doing?" They go, "Oh, I'm busy." Right? Well, busy is not an answer to the question of how are you, first of all, right? So but for me, what the JOMO versus FOMO allows me to do is simply say no to more stuff. And so there's times like, for example, in the run up to the summit where I will simply go to my wife and I will say, from now on, like the answer is no to like whatever, literally like whatever comes in until June. The answer is it ain't going to happen. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate my friends or want to do whatever, but like ain't happening because I need to do stuff for me. And uh, so as it relates to the need to always be busy and doing things, if I can simply spend time, like writing down in a notebook, like here's what I'm doing and focusing on the 2, 3 things that actually matter versus staring at my email or whatever, LinkedIn all day. Uh, that allows me to be much more focused on what I'm doing. It feels like I'm doing less because I'm just in front of a piece of paper, writing stuff down. Turns out it's way more important than anything else. Similarly, another one that I try to do is sometimes I feel this like anxiety in my body, or I feel shallow breathing, or I feel kind of tense, and reminding myself that I live in this beautiful town. I live in North Boulder. I've got all these like walking areas around me. I have a dog and I can take the dog and off we go. Even if it's only for 20 minutes, the benefit's really, really tremendous to be able to just get a little bit of fresh air and sunshine and a little bit of movement of my body. So those are ways in which I start to interrupt the pattern. Like I always have to be doing stuff. Relaxing for me is not like I can do it, but then it's kind of like I ping pong back and forth, So either I feel like relaxing state, like I typically have no problem like being on vacation for a week and like doing very little, but then I go back into like this like hyperactive mode. So those are the things that I'm trying to work on, and I have some kind of little approaches there.
I have the exact same habit, so I totally get that and try to get myself to slow down a bit. But you mentioned identity, which I think is actually like an important crux to this whole thing, where if you're defining yourself as this person who is busy, or maybe even just like you are your title, job title,
Yeah.
or all of these things. Do you have any thoughts on how one can start to let go of that identity or the belief structures that that identity creates?
Well, this is a really big deal for entrepreneurs in
Exactly.
particular because we over-identify with our companies. We become our companies. We become, oh, I'm the person who does X, and like literally like you're that person in here from the company. And sometimes people don't even know your last name; they just know that your first name and the name of your company, right? And that's insidious because we get totally merged with our companies. And I've talked to so many CEOs over the last couple of years who are just like boom, fused with their companies. And the issue there is then I personalize everything that happens. I personalize the good, I personalize the bad, I overreact in one direction, I overreact in the other direction. And I can sometimes forget about the other identities that I also maintain as a human being, right? Which are the roles that I'm also playing. So yes, in addition to being a CEO, I'm also whatever. I'm also in a relationship. I'm also this. I'm also that. Right. So we can sometimes forget and then really just go all in on that. And for a lot of us, our worth and our sense of self-worth is then tapped in or trapped and linked to the company as a result, right? So we think if I'm over identified with my company and I over personalize everything, then if the company is doing well, I'm a good person. If the company is doing poorly, then I'm a bad person, or it's the result of my decisions, right? If the company does well, it's all because of the great decisions I made. Look at me, how wonderful I am. If the company is suffering or having some challenge, then look at all the terrible, stupid decisions I'm making. And that really does us no favors, right? So this does us no favors whatsoever, because we get all wrapped around the axle of the business and of that identity, instead of recognizing that a lot of things have to do with luck, timing, all the other things that go into a business. And the difficult part is to look at this and say, what of these elements are in my control and what of these are not? Right? I can't control, like the last few days, the stock market has been like an absolute disaster. Right? I can't control that. I can control what I'm doing. I can control where I'm finding my inspiration. I can control how I'm spending my time, but I can't control all these other macro things that are happening out there in the world. And similarly, for when it comes to the business, yeah, sure, there are some levers I can pull to increase the chances of success, but I can't guarantee that a company is going to succeed, especially not in the startup world where 70 to 90% of the companies are expected to fail. So everyone already knows this is a tough bet, right? And they say, well, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to do it, which is great, because business and entrepreneurship is a vehicle for your own personal and spiritual growth. So we should all be doing it. I believe we should all be doing it with bright minds and open hearts. We should do all this stuff, but sometimes it does get tough around the identity part, for sure.
Yeah, totally. So when people come to your conference, they have these
Mm.
different challenges and
Mm.
they have this through line. What are some of the outcomes they experience like towards the end of the conference, or what do they say the benefits are from learning these skills?
So as much as I think that, or I would like to think that people appreciate the conference because of all the thought I put into curating the event and getting great speakers up there, the reality is that most people love the conference because of who they meet and all the spontaneous interactions that happen. And so I just basically create the container and then see what happens. Now, that being said, we do have amazing speakers who are giving you content and guidance and advice and inspiration and all that stuff from the stage in sort of a traditional format. But when I talk to people, they say things like, "Oh, I was this close to deciding to stay in my business that I'd been with for 10 years that was starting to zap me. And then I met someone at the summit and they gave me this idea or inspiration or insight. And then bang, now I'm doing something completely different and I feel way better and happier and I'm making more money and all this stuff." Right. So like that happens. And it's amazing how many people come to the event and they're at some kind of crossroads. They're at some sort of decision point in their lives. Should I stay or should I go? Should I start a company or stay where I am? Those kind of decisions. And they go there, and most of this like doesn't happen in the rational mind. Most of this happens because you get into a room with 200 other entrepreneurs, and guess what? Our nervous systems all start to calibrate together. And so everyone's like, whew, right? And the shoulders go down and the smiles go up. At the beginning of the day, everyone's like, still a little bit awkward and like testing out the waters and who's who, what's going on there. By the end of the day, everyone's like hugging and crying and, all this sort of stuff. So the actual benefit comes from being around people, feeling the group energy, realizing that you're supported, realizing that you're not alone. All that allows you to basically cool down your nervous system. When you do that, then your creative brain can go and find all sorts of problems and like things can pop up that you otherwise wouldn't have had time or energy for. So that's where the magic happens. The magic is not us like feeding great things from the stage, although it's pretty awesome. The magic is in the wisdom and insights that everyone is already carrying around in their heads, just not willing to look at yet.
I love that. That's so true and always the way things work.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I get this all benefit I wasn't expecting, and then this other thing is not
Right.
what I thought it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. I mean, and look, like we have amazing speakers. Like there's really an area that we've been very high quality stuff. So we've had Ryan Holiday, the Stoic author, came out a couple of years ago. Gay Hendricks, the guy who came up with the Zone of Genius, he did a workshop with us. Kaylee Klempt, co-author of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. Dr. Sri Kumar Rao, who's this incredible like business philosopher and guru. This year, Ben Hardy, and also Michael Freeman this year, who is probably the world's top expert on entrepreneur mental health. And so he's going to come out. He wrote a very famous paper in 2015 called Are Entrepreneurs Touched with Fire? It's this incredible look into the psychology of entrepreneurs. And it turns out that entrepreneurs are wired differently than the rest of the sample set, right? Entrepreneurs simply have different upbringings, different wirings, different emotional reactions to stuff, different levels of tenacity, creativity, problem solving. And so we literally are different than the rest of the population. And that has pros and cons. So there's good and bad sides to that. And his work has been to show, what does that mean? What can we do about that? What can we learn from it? And this is a super interesting topic for people. So we do have like extremely high quality speakers. And at the same time, a lot of the magic happens in the interactions that people are having in the room.
Well, all of this sounds wonderful. Where can people go to learn more about you and about the conference and anything else you want to share?
Yeah, the summit is consciousentrepreneur.us is the website. We actually created a coupon code for your group, and so so use code Berkeley, and that'll get you $100 off your ticket. So that's something that hopefully some of your audience is able to take advantage of. Up on the Conscious Entrepreneur website, we've got not only information about this year, we also have about 85 podcast episodes and a couple dozen of previous talks and sessions at Summit. So this is our 4th year. So we have 3 years of other great stuff on there. There's a ton of content to see about it. You can see, is this right? Does it resonate with me? And so I really recommend that people check out consciousentrepreneur.us. As for finding me, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So just search for Alex Raymond on LinkedIn. And that's probably the best way to get in touch.
Well, wonderful. I know this has been extremely interesting to me as an entrepreneur who's obsessed with mental health. And I hope that it's been super interesting for our audience as well. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chicky. Thanks for having me.
If you're a coach, consultant, or well-being entrepreneur, grab free science-based content to grow your business by clicking the ebook link in the description below.